Now, as I said to Senator Schumer, I have 3 or 4 questions I'd like to ask him. I think they take short answers, so I'm not doing this to extend it out, but to get some clarification. Senator Schumer.
Can we go just for a moment?
Okay, go ahead.
I have to step out just for a moment. I'll give the gavel to Senator Schumer, but I know that
okay, sure.
You two go back and forth in the questions. I'll be right back.
It'll just take a minute. What if a person thinks that they may have displaced their gun? No, does a 24-hour period apply?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah, what if a person thinks that they have misplaced their gun? Does the 24-hour period apply?
Yeah, I believe on all these issues which you have brought up in terms of what if they think they've misplaced their gun, we don't intend it to cover that. We intend if you know the gun is lost that you are required to report it. These are the kinds of provisions, the family exception, the gun safety. As I said, I put in the ideal bill that law enforcement and others want. We're willing to negotiate and compromise on those, as I am doing with my colleagues. Okay. And so I am certain that even under this proposal, if it's a 24-hour period and you think it's lost, you don't have to report it. You have to, if you know it's lost, you would have to report it.
I bring that up because I said originally that I didn't think the bill was ready. Another question, how does law enforcement benefit from simply reporting that a gun is lost or stolen without specific identifying information?
Well, the more identifying information, the better. But, as we know, one of the best ways, 90% of the guns that cause crimes in the city in which I live, New York City, come from out of state. 90%. So we can have whatever laws we want in New York State, they won't do much good. The gun runners, the people you've talked about, the straw purchasers, and everybody else go to other states. The best way to figure out how these straw purchasers are working are tracing the guns. So if a gun is reported lost or stolen, it helps law enforcement in that tracing process.
I don't know that that's responsive.
Well, they think so.
Okay. I was worried about the cost for the additional federal and local law enforcement who will take reports of lost or stolen guns. Has that been taken into consideration by your behind your legislation?
Well, the whole mixed system, obviously, is paid for by the federal government in the provisions of our bill and in the provisions of any compromise, and I think they're even in the provisions that Senator Graham and Senator Begich have introduced. There are incentives for the states to complete their records, and they get some funding to do that.
Yeah. And my last question, have you taken into consideration if a person reports to the police that their gun has been stolen, but the officer misplaces the form that shows that the citizen complied, is a people, then
I'm sure we can deal with that issue. There are all kinds of situations where law enforcement may lose a record, and we don't hold the person who reported the record liable, and the same would be here. I just want to make a few brief points here before asking my other colleagues. Look, the bottom line is that the Brady Law, by almost universal agreement, has been extremely successful, without impinging on the rights of legitimate gun owners. I go to gun clubs in the rural parts of my state, and I talk to folks there. And I understand their view that the Second Amendment has often been treated differently than the First or the Fourth or whatever. And I am sympathetic to that view, was even before Heller. The Heller decision said that. But I ask them, has the Brady Law interfered with your right to bear arms in any way? And they say absolutely not. Almost all of them are for it. Almost all of them. And all we're doing here is extending the success of the Brady Law to the areas that it doesn't cover. We're using the same exact system of reporting. This idea that this will lead to national registration or confiscation, I have to tell you, my good friend Chuck Grassley, that demeans the arguments here. The bill explicitly says there is no registration, explicitly says no confiscation, but better than that, we have a track record of history. We have the exact same system that's been used when you go to a FFL being implemented for gun shows, and other types of transactions. Not a whit has anyone, including the NRA or maybe some of the groups further to the right, have they said that this is a system of registration. They're not opposing. I don't see anyone putting in legislation to repeal the Brady Law because it's going to lead to a system of registration. And we do the same exact thing. We do the same exact reporting system as the Brady Law now does for guns that are bought at an FFL, and we do it for gun shows and for the most burgeoning area of gun sales, which is Internet. Now, I'm working on compromise with my colleagues, as I told you, and they have some of the same concerns that you do on family exceptions, on gun safety training, on lost and stolen guns, and I am sure we can work those out, even though law enforcement would prefer us not to. But all I'm saying here, you know, it's sad. Right after Newtown, there was a view that maybe the right place that we could all come together on was background checks. Because background checks, unlike some of the other proposals here, which I support, do not interfere with the law-abiding citizen's right to bear arms. They simply say that a felon, someone who is adjudicated mentally ill, someone who's a spousal abuser shouldn't get that gun, and everyone says that's the truth, that's what we should do. Now, the argument that my colleagues make that, well, there'll still be people who will get around the law. That's true. This isn't going to be a perfect bill, but it'll sure reduce crimes. 1.7 million people went into FFLs and were denied a gun. Gun crimes have greatly declined since this has been enacted. And, you know, I wish you'd show the same view on other... I don't wish, because I'm a tough-on-crime guy. But you don't use that on any other law, on terrorism, on robbery, on murder, on money laundering. We never see the argument that, oh, the bad people we shouldn't have laws because the bad people will get around them anyway. Only on this issue do you, and it makes no sense in my judgment in all due respect. So I would hope we would pass this legislation. We will move to compromise. I'm optimistic we'll find a compromise that will involve people who have different views than I do generally on guns and on assault weapon bans and on things like that. But I would hope and pray that we would debate the rational parts of this bill and not say this bill is going to lead to confiscation. There is nothing, or registration. There is nothing in this bill or nothing in the history since the Brady Law was passed that indicates a scintilla of truth to that argument.
To tell you why, then, and I understand Senator Grassley has no amendments. Go ahead, Senator Grassley.
No amendments, just 10 seconds rebuttal. I thought I was trying to be very authoritative and not emotional about registration when I cited the testimony before this committee or the publications from the National Institute of Justice. I'll stop there and defer to any other members. I've said all I'm going to say on the subject.
All statements will be, the Senator's will be placed in the record. I'm just asking, are there any amendments to Senator Schumer's bill? If not, then the clerk will call the roll on the Senator Schumer's legislation as amended by his amendment.
Mrs. Feinstein.
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Schumer.
Aye.
Mr. Durbin.
Aye.
Mr. Whitehouse.
Aye by proxy, sorry.
Ms. Klobuchar.
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Franken. Aye. Mr. Coons. Aye. Mr. Blumenthal. Aye. Ms. Hirono. Aye. Mr. Grassley.
No.
Mr. Hatch.
No.
Mr. Sessions.
No by proxy.
Mr. Graham. No. Mr. Cornyn.
No by proxy.
Mr. Lee. No. Mr. Cruz. No. Mr. Flake.
No by proxy.
Mr. Chairman.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, the votes are 10 yeas, 8 nays.
Thank you. And then it will be reported to the floor.